Hello, everyone. I'm back here in studio, and we are talking about environment. Now, I want you to keep in mind, we think about environment, we have to understand how to define it and what we really mean when we think about environments and how environments impact us. And so I want to define it this way. So all of the things, conditions, and people that influence our behavior. There's many ways to define environment, but for today, I want us to define it this way. And I want you to really think about what's being said here because, there's a lot really here. So we're going to talk about different elements of this, but I want you to think about environment because, again, if you want to set yourself up to succeed in business, in a marriage, in parenting, in sports, whatever that might be, you have to think about environment. And so, before you can even get to that thing you want to, do, you have to think about setting yourself up to be successful in that. Now, sometimes environment happens to us, and there's other times we have some authority and we can, dictate the environment. So all of these things are things we have to consider. But first, we must define it. So, we're going to just kind of do some coaching here on this particular show. So when we think about all of the things, right? So things is one element of this, and there can be many different things that help to shape an environment. And, there was points in my life where the environment wasn't good, and there were things in that environment that, definitely contributed to how that environment felt, right? And this could be, any particular thing. It could be items, it could be, different things that are there. Literally certain items and things can be in a room or in a place that change how you feel. So things are important. And then there's conditions, right? So there can be specific conditions that you might be dealing with, right? So, sometimes people can be in a financial condition or a health condition, right? So all of that, there could be, specific conditions that can also dictate how an environment feels. And then, of course, there is people. So we don't want to forget about people because people are really, great environment makers, right? Because people have the ability to insert thought, to insert emotion, to insert ideas into any person or into any environment, you can say. So you definitely know that people are a big one, and we'll talk more about that later. But that's another critical area. Now, another thing I want you to see why environment is so important is that environment has the ability to influence. So when we think about influence, now, influence is, seems like just a word, but influence is very powerful because influence is something that urges you, is something that moves you, is something that pushes you to do certain things. And when you think about, influence, there's so many people today that struggle, whether that's from pressures of life or peer pressure or pressure that they put on themselves. Influence is very important. And so, influence can be good, something can be a positive influence, and something can be a negative influence. So we have to be very careful about the fact that environment and the things, conditions, and people that surround whatever it is that we're trying to do. And again, you have to look at environment also in different areas of your life, right? So when you think for a minute, I'll come back to this in a minute, but when you think about yourself, we have to understand that there's an environment that you are in, but there's also these kind of sub-environments where you begin to break yourself up a little bit, and you'll find that there's certain areas, where, things you're trying to do. We talked about your career, you got other things going on in, your relationships and so forth. You got things you're trying to do with respect to your health. So what type of environment have you created surrounding health? So, the list can go on and on. So even though there is an environment, right, of my life, I have to also think about the subcategories and the sub-environments that I might be in. And in each of those environments, there are influencers. And there's things that I can have, both in the things, conditions, and people that are dictating how those environments are allowing me to achieve the goals that I might have in each of those sub-environments. So, make sure and keep that in mind. Now, a big one here is the word behavior, right? So when we think about behavior is what I actually do, right? So what I do is my behavior. So when we think about what I do, making sure that, you do at the end of the day, my success or my outcomes in life are based on what I do, right? So it would mean that, like a lot of people say, walk the talk, right? Or, actions are greater than words and all of these types of things. But that really is true, because what I do is what really, at the end of the day, will matter. But what's so important about environment is that there's something constantly influencing me to do things. And what is that? It's my environment. So we again understand this, and we talk about that important equation. I'm gonna borrow some of the whiteboard over here. So we know that environment, you've heard me talk about this many times, environment leads to how I think. So that's why environment, again, is so critical. How I think leads to how I feel, which is where my emotions come in. And then most of the time we do what we feel, right? So again, when we do what we feel, this dictates the, basically the outcomes in my life, whether or not I am successful or not, in different things that I'm trying to do. So we have to understand that sometimes we focus a lot on what is being done, and we should, because doing is important. But a lot of times, if you really want to change outcomes, you can't just focus on what you do, because you already are in a cycle. You have to start thinking about the environment that you have allowed to be created, because that environment is dictating everything. And this is why, again, when you're trying to, achieve a goal, when you want to accomplish certain things, you have to have the courage to think about the environment that shapes all of these sub areas that, again, will allow you to change how you think, feel, and what you do. So again, I want this to, something I want you to think about. Again, in summary, all of the things, conditions, and people that influence our behavior, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we're striving for. We want to get control of this definition of environment. And when we understand this definition, we can then begin to understand how do we begin to work within this definition to create the life that we want. And when we come back, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper into the types of environments, and we're gonna explore this from another angle. And so when we get back, make sure you're paying attention, because there's some things we've touched on here that kind of get into it, but we're gonna call them out more clearly so that we can actually use it as a successful tool. We'll be right back.
We are starting a movement called You Are a CEO. You are a CEO. You run the business of you, and you can go as far as you want to go. Be the CEO of your future. Be the CEO of your destiny. Be the CEO of your career. Be the CEO of being an entrepreneur. As of today, my past does not matter. I am officially stepping into my new position. I am powerful. I know what I have to do. I am smart. I am able. I refuse to look back. Anything that ever hurt me has now become my fuel. I will make no excuses. I am now a high achiever. I am now an executive. I am the CEO of me.
Hello, everyone. I'm back here in the COTV Live studio, and we are talking about environment. So we defined environment a little bit. Now I want to get into types of environment. Now, there's a lot of ways to describe environment, but I want to focus on some specific types that are relative to what we're, trying to accomplish by using environment as a creative tool to, create the lives that we want. So when we think about types of environment, So I want to focus on a few different types. So one of those areas is physical. So the physical environment that we are in. The second one is social, to do with the social environments that we're in. And the third one I want to focus on is mental. So these are three environments that I want to, talk a little bit about. So the first one, when we think about the physical environments that we are in, so a lot of times we have to actually, understand the actual places and how organized things are, how clean things are. So did you know a physical environment that is cluttered, is highly unorganized, and, has a sense of, just kind of scatteredness to it, that it tends to make you feel a certain way? And this is why when we think about the places that we actually go, the physical environment. So this is a room, this is a car, this is a building, this is, a purse, this could be a bag, it could be, a kitchen, all of these things, a garage. And I know some of these things are getting personal, but those physical environments are important. So when we feel clutter, when things are messy or unorganized, it has a direct impact on how we feel. And so we want to consider that the physical environments that are around our life, these physical environments actually shape a lot of how we feel. So before you can even try to get to an outcome, you have to think about what is the environment. I've seen some parents where they tell their kids to go study, they go in the room and they go study, but they don't see that the kid doesn't have a good physical environment to study appropriately. So if they had a nice little area, if they can't afford to have a room of their own and an office or something, but there's a way to organize the kitchen table or a little area by this chair where they can be organized enough to be able to concentrate and think. So physical environment is very, very important. Then we deal with social environment, right? So again, when we start thinking about how we work with others and that bond between people, so that social environment is so important, because when you start considering the people that are around you, and these people are a direct influence, right? And so when you get all these different individuals that have an influence, and you start, what you start to do is you start to get kind of a relationship inventory. So each relationship you have and that makes up your social life, they are adding something to you, and it becomes an inventory that you carry. You carry some of the people around you, you carry their problems, you carry their successes, you carry their worries, you carry their thoughts, you carry their fears. Now, I'm not talking about yours, you got your own, right? But now you have to consider the people around you, you carry a piece of what they're going through. So you have to evaluate what environment is being created by the people that are investing in my environment socially. So this is why the people that are around our life is so important, because there is a relationship inventory cost. And you have to understand, is it become an inventory that is not good, or has it actually become an asset, right? So we talk about assets, this is another way of looking at it, versus liabilities. So when we think about liabilities, these are debts, right? Things that it always feels like we owe something. It feels like it's taking something away. An asset is something that generates, something that creates income, right? What's coming into you. I want you to think about that. So we want to think about that. How do we get the right type of things coming into our life? from a social perspective. This is very, very important, and every single person has to be evaluated. And you have to know, and that's why even when we're at work, there's a difference when you're at work and maybe you have a job where you're supposed to help other people. You might be a nurse, you might be a teacher, you could be someone that provides services that solve problems, but you're not looking at it as a social life. So you kind of have another bucket for that. So you solve their problem and you go home to your life, right? You can turn that off. That's work. But when you start allowing things in your social space, and or some people who bring work home with them, you have to evaluate the asset and liabilities and what impact is that having on your social environment. Now, when we think about mental, a lot of times when we think about our mental environment here, so a lot of times, there's a big, question over how do we put that smile on someone's face. And a lot of times, when you think about, this little area up here that we call our brain, and we know where there's a lot of thinking going on. So believe it or not, the way you think is an environment. So again, when I defined environment earlier, I talked about people that can influence, but sometimes you're the person. I want you to think about that for a minute. So again, in my thinking, there's several things. I've got my background. I've got life experiences. And of course, there's other things, right? Like insecurities, fears, and I could go on and on and on. And all of these things are impacting how I think. But what you have to look at is what is the environment that I'm allowing to be created. So we all might get a thought back from our background. We can get a thought from tough life experiences. We all get insecure sometime. We all feel fear sometime, right? But the most dangerous thing, and a big word I want you to remember, is the word pattern. So when patterns are created, now we're dealing with environment, because I've got a pattern of allowing my background to impact what I do whenever I have an opportunity, because I was hurt when I was younger by, things that didn't go right. When an opportunity comes up, I can go back to that place, and that environment begins to come over my thinking. I can have a life experience in a relationship. So anytime someone tries to show me love, I remember someone who hurt me, and that environment is created in my thinking. So before I could ever get to any outcome in a successful relationship, a successful job, a successful parenting, whatever it might be, I'm already blocked by an environment that I'm living in mentally. So we all have a mental sky. And that sky, we have to evaluate what is flying in that sky. And so this is what we're talking about when we talk about making sure that our mental environment is stable enough for us to be able to move forward and have the type of life that we want. So all of this is very critical. So I want you to consider, when you think about improving your life, think about that I have to evaluate what is happening in my physical environment. So first and foremost, what is the physical environment that I'm in? What is the physical environment? Is it organized? Is it clean? Is it orderly? Is it something that would make me feel good about taking the next step of whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish? Then I have to value my social life, right? What are the people? Now, I can take social, and even though we're talking about life itself, but you do, even within a company, have to socialize with the right people. If you're doing something in a specific area of your life, you want to improve your health. We talked about that in the last segment. Are you socializing with anyone who also wants to do that? That is keeping you, so it seems like a small thing, but you might have a friend that loves to eat a certain way, and you want to change your eating. And you start saying, I want to do it, but this person, you don't realize it, they keep taking you back because of the environment that they have and the way that they are. It's no knock against them, but you have to evaluate that if you really want to improve that. And then mental. You have to evaluate, am I self-aware of how I tend to think? And also remember, there's the mental thinking that I have, but also when I think back to the social, someone else's mental environment can impact my mental environment. So we also have to watch that as well. So these are 3 areas that I want you to keep in mind: your physical environment, your social environment, and your mental environment. If you have anything that you want to do better, you have to deal with these 3 things. And if you do, I guarantee you it will have a direct influence, and this time you have control over it so that influence can lead to the behavior that you actually want.